Thank you, Andrew. Obviously, we could end there because everyone wants a drink, but that would be a bit weird. I don't think our bodies will be profoundly changed with a 10-minute delay and liquor coming in. We just need to have a space for 10 to 15 minutes maximum for anyone who wants to intervene about the day, any thoughts they haven't had a chance. And I hope you've got the feel of the design art that Karin, Lina, Andreas and I put together, which is basically a deep and darkly depressing dive into the inner recesses of the new order being built in the morning. And as Anna brought out beautifully, the constitutive violence, that's the heart of it. And then in the afternoon, a more ambivalent sort of reflection on our own values and normative frameworks, their histories, their futures. How do we get a distance for this in an honest way, particularly as Pyle brought out, in a comparative framework? We have to be honest and clear about where we think we stand. Otherwise, we're not going to get very far. So that's what we've been trying to do. And Julie provided a bridge between the two with her sort of double talk. So there we are. Anyone who'd like to pitch in for, particularly people who haven't had a chance to speak in the course of the day, anyone who'd like to pitch in a sort of encapsulating thought about where we've got to, what we have still forgotten to say, now's the chance. I say particularly people who haven't spoken before because it's important to give priority to those people, but obviously if you've got something urgent to say, please, this is a chance to say it. Nicholas. I feel like a talk show host. It's not meant to be that's not what I'm aspiring to be. But.
Thanks so much. And I guess what I wanted to say is I really appreciate the sort of the deep reflections over the course of the day. I wonder what maybe the appropriate form would be to move more toward proposals, like not necessarily solutions, but at least more concrete things that we could debate or discuss or feel like we're making some advances. Maybe this isn't the right place to do that, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, could I can't give details, but I just share with you a sort of thought that I've had in the past year, which is there's such an amazing convergence now of people across many disciplines around these issues that we have to do something. We can't just be silent. I have an idea for a small group of scholars at the moment, privately, because we may mess up, but publicly, if we're confident we can move forward, building a sort of manifesto platform document, which could be publicized in op-eds right across many countries, which would really concretize some of the values at stake here and what the dangers are as our whole academic community sees them. Because surely our consensus doesn't count for nothing in all public spheres. And having done that, to have our rolling series of conferences starting next year, based on a sort of basic template, which would say, here are the core issues, in Barcelona, Hyderabad, wherever, debate them, try and collect those conclusions in a central place. That was the sort of idea I had, but it may go nowhere because I may not be able to agree with my 4 or 5 secret colleagues on what we think. But if we do, we're going to try and develop something like that. Alice.
So one of the things that I've noticed the most in the last year or so of talking a lot about platform accountability and platform governance is that there's a huge disconnect between the way academics understand platforms and the way people who work at platforms understand platforms. And this came up a little bit in the last panel with this discussion of methods and access. If you're trained as an ethnographer and you have done ethnographic work, you know that getting access to anything is very hard and takes a long period of time. You could be doing an ethnography of a shoe store, and it could take you 6 months to get in the door and get enough trust with the workers to do interviews and understand the norms of the workplace. I have worked in industry, but I've also did a dissertation based on tech workers before I worked in industry, and that was just by moving to San Francisco, hanging around for 9 months and doing old-fashioned ethnographic fieldwork of showing up at places and talking to people. It is not impossible to understand the norms and values of the tech industry. It is just hard. It is a difficult method. But I would really encourage people to continue doing studies of the tech industry and their industrial practice and looking at these things not as these mystifying black boxes necessarily, but of products that are produced by individuals in the same way that we've done production ethnographies of newsrooms, like Joe said, of like NBC and CBS. I would push back against the idea that these things are impossible. What is very hard is getting access to data. Like if you want platform data, that is almost impossible to get. And I 100% agree with that. And I think there's some very big structural reasons why, which I'm happy to talk about with a glass of wine in my hand. But yeah, but I think that there's still a lot that we can do as critical ethnographic and qualitative scholars to increase our understanding of how platforms function.
Yeah, hi everyone. I want to thank you for this day. It's been very fruitful and all the presentations been very, very wonderful. But what I would like to add here is that maybe we as scholars should also step out of the academia of talking about datification, because like from my own research project, I've noticed that people outside academia and even inside academia have quite vague understanding what datification actually means. And if you want to kind of have some kind of resistance or kind of movement that also offers other kind of options in addition to regulation, but I think it's important, but regulation doesn't come out of like from vacuum. It's based on culture and society. So I think we should do some cooperation with educators, or also like on lower levels of, I mean, schools and so on, and maybe working with some other like organizations.
Okay, maybe I can just tie into that, because at Utrecht, where I work, my colleague Mirko Tobias-Shaver has set up the Utrecht Data School. And part of what happens there is that we actually get applied research projects that help fund education, but it also at the same time gives us access to these companies who are very willing and eager to work with us. So we get this insight. He likes to call it an entrepreneurial vehicle. So we're actually working side by side with practitioners, helping them solve their problems. But at the same time, it gives us an opportunity to study how they think and employ data, which is the kind of data we don't get if we just sit out in our ivory tower, right? But that has its own problems and difficulties when it comes to retaining your autonomy as an academic, and also in terms of how academia is financed. One of the biggest difficulties we have is that we're hired to do these applied research projects, and they want this nice little report at the end, but we don't actually have the time to critically reflect on that as academics, because there was no finance for that part of the story. So there's some movement we're trying to make, and I think especially the work we've been doing with municipalities, in which we've helped them collaboratively create a digital ethics decision aid, right? So we're actually, as humanities scholars, very excited about the fact that we have this kind of impact in the field, in which the city of Utrecht and the police are coming to us to help with questions around data literacy and around data ethics. So that's kind of how we're trying to enter the field and change. Yeah.
Probably one or two more, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to, well, first of all, thank the organisers and the speakers for a really fantastic and rich and illuminating day. And also just to kind of add a +1 to Nick's idea of some sort of manifesto or something of that sort, because I think it ties quite a nice bow on what has been a very complex day, both in terms of form and substance. I think in terms of substance, the word that has kind of sprung to mind today in many different iterations is solidarity. I think in that penultimate panel, we heard about the challenges of how do we have any kind of solidarity in a world where we're hyper-individuated, hyper-algorithmized, and so on. But also in terms of form as well, what is our responsibility in the very unique and uniquely privileged position as academics? How do we, find ways to express solidarity in a complicated world? So I just wanted to add some support to that notion.
Any last, right? So we have solidarity, the idea of disrupting the the data order from within, which might be positive.
And I think this relates to some of the last conversations is I really appreciate having the computer scientists in the room, and particularly coming from the media studies side. One of the things that we did in New York, I teach at Queens College at CUNY, and we did a program with Columbia Journalism School and Cornell Tech and NYU, and I think about 5 or 6 other schools, and we taught a class across all of the disciplines. And at the time, we were really trying to deal with fake news and so on. And one of the issues that we found, because we're really media studies based, and most of the other were technology based programs. You know, if your tool is technology, you think you can solve the problem with technology. And we as media studies scholars were like, no. And the first time we did this as a group, we weren't really appreciated. Let me just say that. And then the second time, all of a sudden they said, no, come back, because they started to understand that there does need to be this cross-pollination. But I think there also needs to be cross-pollination for us too, because I can't do what Salon does, and it scares me sometimes to think about how does computer technology work. But I also understand that I don't know how a television works, but I still can criticize it to Alice's point. I can do ethnography within tech companies without fully understanding how each piece of those technologies work, and so we shouldn't be afraid to walk into those places.
Well, I think we are at 5:05. We really do deserve a drink, but we've been told we mustn't be afraid. So what could be a better way to end than that? Thank you all for coming. Thanks for your energy. And we may want your email addresses if you consent, because we'd like to build this group into something even bigger. But you'll be asked for your consent. Thank you for coming.